Hello and welcome. Every show is built on a question, viewers. India Globals has always been, what does the world mean for India? And well, what does India mean for the world? Now, it's the question that brought this very show to life. And of course, it's the question I'm here to keep on asking every single day across every story we cover. That's right. I'm Arjun Samar Mahindran, and well, this is India Global. And here are the headlines this Wednesday. US immigration's new May rules tighten green card queue, pushing wait times back by months for elite workers and years for other Indians. We break down the 10 big changes you need to know. US and Iran may return to Islamabad this week for round 2 of talks, but Washington warns its final offer is on the table. With the Strait of Hormuz and nuclear red lines at stake, we explore if this is the last shot at peace or a slide into more confrontation. There's a big boost for India. That's right. IMF raises GDP growth forecast to 6.5% for financial year 27 despite the ongoing West Asia conflict. Major humanitarian tragedy unfolds in the Andaman Sea. Nearly 250 Rohingya and Bangladeshi migrants fear missing after an overcrowded boat en route Malaysia capsizes. Rescue and search ops still underway. And Trackster Vitaly issues massive public apology after falsely accusing an innocent Indian man of being a child pedophile on a live stream. Indian diaspora up in arms over streamer's latest controversy. On to our lead story this Wednesday, viewers. If there's someone you know who's waiting for a US green card, well, this month's update from Washington is something you definitely need to hear. That's right, America has just changed the rules. And for Indians in the queue, this impact, well, it's immediate. We show you the 10 big changes that America has brought into its May visa update. First and foremost, the US publishes a monthly list that tells applicants how long they must wait before their green card can finally be approved. As you see here, in May, these rules governing the list have been made stricter right here on the wall besides May. Now, people can move forward this month than last. Change number 2, every applicant has a priority date. Now, the day their paperwork was first submitted, that's their priority date. Think of it as a token number at a government office. The visa bulletin each month tells you which token numbers are currently being called in. The USCIS has switched to stricter rules this very month. Now, in April, the US immigration used a more generous chart that allowed more Indians to file applications. In May, well, they've switched to the tougher final action dates chart. Now, some Indians who were eligible last month are now logged out until further notice. Moving forward, the EB2 category, speaking of the EB2 category, it's the category for engineers, doctors, and even advanced degree professionals. It's the very backbone of India's US immigrant workforce. Now, this eligible cutoff date has just jumped backwards by 6 long months. If your application was filed between, say, mid-2014 and early 2015, you cannot move forward in May. Speaking of the EB1, applicants, it's reserved for India's best, its top researchers, senior executives, award-winning professionals, you name it. Even this elite queue, by the way, has been pushed back by 8 months in just one bulletin. That's right, those with applications filed after April 2023 cannot proceed in May. That's the next month for which the advisory has come out. Now, for regular skilled professionals or the EB3 category, America is currently processing Indian applications filed in the month of November 2013. Now, that's a 12-year plus backlog. For context, as someone who applied back in 2013 and was likely, in their late 20s, they could now be in their mid-40s before their green card finally arrives. The big change number 7, the US law has capped each country at the same number of green cards per year. Now, this comes regardless of how many people apply from that one country. In the case of India, with 1.4 billion people and one of the world's largest skills workforces, we get the same annual allocation as a country 100 its size. Now, the result is shocking. waits for decades and sometime even a lifetime, as I was just explaining. But there's all not bad news. There's good news for Indian families, for Indians trying to bring spouses, their children, or even siblings to America through family sponsorship. Most categories have advanced significantly this month. The F1 category for adult unmarried children of US citizens has leapt forward by 7 full months. On to number 9, where there's a separate Trump administration pause on immigration visas processing at US embassies and even consulates across the world. This reflects, this affects nationals from 75 countries at the moment. So given if your priority date is technically current this month, if you're applying from India, you may not be able to actually proceed. And the final point number 10, the April 2026 offered a wider filing window than May. For Indians in the EB1 and the EB2 categories near the cutoff dates, April was a rare opening. Why? Because those who did not file in April and fall between the two cutoff dates are now locked out, potentially at months in length or for even longer. Well, to delve more on this and to get more on this story, I'm joined by Manifest Law's immigration attorney Anna Gabriela Urizar, who joins us straight from New York. Anna, first and foremost, thank you so much for taking us out the time and joining us on this broadcast. My first question to you, and a question on many minds, I'm sure, why did the USCIS switch from filing dates to final action dates, especially in May? Is this a political decision or just a technical one?
So we were not expecting that to happen because usually USCIS allows for people to file for their green card application adjustment of status, and that unlocks a lot of benefits like pending adjustment of status and also a work permit. And they usually use that dates for filing, but this month for May, they decided to go with final action dates, like you explained, leaves many people who are born in India out and not able to file. People believe, and immigration attorneys are talking about this, and they believe that it may be due because in the past few months, the category for EB1 and EB2 did a big movement. So they're trying to recalibrate, and USCIS officers already have a massive backlog. If you take a look at the numbers, we're talking about the vast majority of cases are very delayed. So they're trying to recalibrate and see how many more applications can take.
Now, if someone's missed the April window, what are really their options right now as things stand?
So they basically have 2 weeks. And something to understand that's very important is that the petition has to be received by USCIS before the end of April. So that means that you even have less than 2 weeks because you have to mail your package, ship it, and ensure that USCIS receives this application before the end of the month. And basically people who are going to be left out of the ability to file in May, their options are very limited, especially if they're maxing out on OPT, if they're maxing out on an H-1B and they don't have any other option. The alternative will be to basically put their whole life on pause and go back to their home country.
Right, Anna. And the central question now, you see, if you were advising an Indian professional in the US, say today, someone maybe on an H-1B or even an EB2 pending priority date, say to 2016, what would you tell them to do this week and what would you tell them not to do this week?
So what I will tell people to do this week is to please check the priority date and make sure that you are able to file for adjustment of status on the work permit before the end of the month. But then now in terms of what not to do, I will advise them as well not to panic and try to file applications on their own because we've seen this mistake happen in other situations like this. Like back in 2018, there was a massive retrogression and people just rushed to file their cases, didn't consult an attorney. They were missing pages, missing signatures. And for very little mistakes like this, the entire application can be rejected. And now USCIS is taking up to 6 weeks to even acknowledge that they receive your package. So imagine getting a package back at the end of May. That's it, like you have no option to move forward.
Absolutely. Act and act fast at that. Thank you so much, Anna, for joining us once again. Anna, Manifest Law's immigration attorney, once again joining us from New York. Shift our focus to Pakistan now, where the first round of high-stakes talks in Islamabad ended how decades of hostility can often do, with optics and not with outcomes. Now, despite being the first direct engagement between the US and Iran in over a decade, the meeting failed to deliver a breakthrough or any kind of a breakthrough. But at the very heart of this deadlock were three familiar fault lines. Fault line number one, control over the Strait of Hormuz. Number two, Iran's ever-expanding nuclear program. And number three, the crippling web of sanctions imposed by Donald Trump-led Washington. But behind closed doors, both sides tested each other's red lines, but neither moved enough to change the equation. Instead, what emerged was a carefully choreographed pause, not peace. That's right, a holding pattern where both sides avoided escalation, but they refused compromise. Now, that door may reopen, but only slightly. Sources indicate that negotiating teams from the US and Iran could very well return to Islamabad as early as this weekend. That's right, as early as this weekend, with Friday to Sunday being kept open for a possible second round of talks. Now, the last round saw US Vice President J.D. Vance and Iranian Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bakr Kalibaf lead their respective delegations. A similar format is expected this time over too, but the mood, well, it shifted. Expectations are sharper, deadlines are tighter, and patience, well, patience on both sides is visibly thinner than it was last week. Why? Because this is no longer just about reopening dialogue, it's very well about proving that dialogue can actually deliver. Washington, on its hand, is not returning to the table empty-handed or even open-ended. According to multiple reports, the US has laid down clear preconditions before talk can meaningfully even resume. The first being Iran must fully reopen the Strait of Hormuz, a critical artery through which nearly a fifth of global oil passes, more than that. Second, any agreement whatsoever reached in Islamabad must have the explicit backing of Iran's supreme leadership, ensuring that commitments made at the table are not reversed back home, like the ones we saw on the 28th of February. Meanwhile, US Vice President J.D. Vance has already described the current American proposal as the final and the best offer. Now, that phrase, that very important phrase, carries weight. Well, how? It signals urgency, but also a warning. A warning that the diplomatic window may not remain open for long. That's right, Washington's message is clear: comply first and negotiate later. Tehran, however, it's not blinking. Iranian officials have made it clear that pressure tactics, including economic sanctions or even strategic blockades, will not force concessions, particularly on uranium enrichment, a program Iran considers central to its sovereignty and security alike. Publicly, the messaging remains firm: no surrender, no symbolic climb down, no negotiation under coercion. Because for Iran, this is not just a negotiation, and it's a narrative battle. Any deal, very importantly, must be framed as strength and not in submission. Now, in the middle of this geopolitical chessboard stands Islamabad. Pakistan is actively coordinating with both sides, Washington and Tehran. It's trying to position itself as willing and as an urgent host, needless to say, for the next round of talks. Officials suggest Iran has responded positively to outreach efforts, but the timelines, viewers, the timelines remain fluid and formal conversation is still awaited. Meanwhile, for Pakistan, this is more than just mediation. It's an opportunity, really, to reassert diplomatic relevance, to act as a bridge between adversaries, and, of course, to elevate its standing in an increasingly fragmented global order. Now, if successful, Islamabad doesn't just hold talks, it shapes outcomes. However, the real question is, can process overcome politics? Because outside the negotiation rooms, tension continues to simmer. That's right. We've seen oil routes remaining vulnerable, military posturing, it's just being intensifying, and the red lines, well, the red lines on both the sides are only getting harder. The second round in Islamabad, or should I say the likely second round, if it ever happens, may not just be another meeting. It could very well be the last meaningful shot at de-escalation before this fragile pause collapses. And of course, if this conflict slips back into the open, there's more confrontation. Now, the first round ended without a breakthrough, but not without consequences. Very importantly, let me point that out. Now, with both sides preparing to return to the big table in Islamabad, hopefully this weekend, the stakes are even higher, and the positions, well, they're even harder, as I was just mentioning. So what can we expect from round two, or the likely round two, and more importantly, what could derail it once again? Meanwhile, in a world battling slowdown, India is scripting a growth story. I'm not saying this, well, the IMF is saying this, viewers. The latest IMF World Economic Outlook, well, it's brought out stronger news for New Delhi. That's right, India's growth forecast, first and foremost, has been revised upward to a whopping 6.5% for the upcoming fiscal. Very importantly, this is higher than earlier estimates of 6.4% in January and even 6.2% in October, as we saw. Now, at a time when the global economy is slowing, this upward revision, in fact, signals confidence in India's economic momentum. And more importantly, this upgrade also comes despite global uncertainty triggered by the war and the following trade disruptions. Now, what makes this story bigger? Well, is the global comparison. You see, while India is growing at 6.5%, right next to me, China has been cut to around 4.4%. The US, well, it's projected at a measly 2.3%. Speaking of the UK, one of the worst hit, it's down to just 0.8% growth. Even global growth itself has been trimmed to nearly 3.1% for the next fiscal year. But the real story is not just growth here, it's resilience. The IMF clearly flags that the Iran conflict or the West Asia conflict has disrupted global momentum. It's pushed oil prices up and, of course, increased inflation risks. Emerging economies, in fact, are being hit harder, with growth forecasts cut to 3.9%, and yet India has held its ground despite oil shocks, trade tariff uncertainty, and global investments volatility. Very important to mention here, New Delhi has managed to stay stable without panic. Now, this points to one key strength: strong domestic demand and internal economic buffers. But the road ahead is not without risk, needless to say. The IMF warns if the conflict continues, global growth could further fall to as low as 2.5%. Meanwhile, for India, key risks remain: oil price spikers, external demand slowdown, global financial volatility. But for now, India stands out as a rare bright spot in a fragile global economy. The big question going forward: can we sustain this growth while the world still struggles? Now, a major diplomatic breakthrough could very well be underway in West Asia. That's right. You see, for the first time since 1993, Israel and Lebanon have agreed to begin direct talks. The development comes after what the US calls productive discussions in Washington. Here's a report.
Two countries that the United States wants to have strong relations with, and we're very happy to. This is a lot more than just about that. This is about bringing a permanent end to 20 or 30 years of Hezbollah's influence in this part of the world. Countries that the United States wants to have strong relations with, and we're very happy to. This is a lot more than just about that. This is about bringing a permanent end to 20 or 30 years of Hezbollah's influence in this part of the world. Two countries that the United States wants to have strong relations with, and we're very happy to. This is a lot more than just about that. This is about bringing a permanent end to 20 or 30 years.
Well, you heard the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio there. Now, the meeting was convened by U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. He was speaking. He described the engagement as a historic opportunity to reduce decades of hostility. Meanwhile, ambassadors from both sides participate in these high-level discussions. Lebanon's leadership has expressed cautious optimism, calling it a possible turning point in ending long-standing hardships. But even as diplomacy gains momentum, the ground situation in southern Lebanon remains tense, volatile, and dangerous, needless to say. And well, India is watching these developments very closely, and its primary concern is the safety of UN peacekeepers on the ground. You see, New Delhi strongly condemned recent attacks on peacekeeping forces, including killing of 3 Indonesian personnel deployed in Lebanon. New Delhi also says these attacks are a direct fallout of escalating clashes between Hezbollah and the Israeli Defense Forces, or the IDF, which are operating in southern Lebanon. Now, in a strong statement, India has urged all sides to respect UN missions and also ensure the safety and security of peacekeepers. Not only this, New Delhi has also demanded accountability for attacks on UN personnel, calling them stark violations of international law. That's right. Now, as one of the largest contributors to the UN peacekeeping force globally, India has made it clear attacks on blue helmets cannot and will not go unpunished.
The contribution of our peacekeepers has been well noted, regarded to global peace and security. We had also issued a statement, which you may have seen, condemning the recent attacks on UNIFIL, in which several troops unfortunately lost their lives. We also pay homage to these brave blue helmet soldiers. It is, once again, we would like to emphasize that the inviolability of UN missions must be ensured, and safety and security of our peacekeepers must be ensured.
You heard the MEA spokesperson there. India has a significant presence on ground in Lebanon. Now, currently, around 600 Indian troops, as you see right here next to me on the big wall, have been deployed in the country as part of the UN interim force in Lebanon. It's also known as UNIFIL, by the way. Now, these troops, very importantly, are stationed along the sensitive blue line. Now, it's the de facto border that separates Israel and Lebanon. Their role is very critical, not just in maintaining peace, but also in preventing the situation from spiraling into a wider war and all-out conflict. Now, India's involvement in Lebanon is nothing new, Indian peacekeepers have been part of UNIFIL ever since 1998. That's nearly 3 decades of continuous deployment. Their responsibilities, well, they include patrolling volatile border areas, monitoring ceasefire violations, and of course, ensuring humanitarian support in conflict-hit zones. But this is not all they do. They also work closely with local communities, helping maintain stability in one of the world's most fragile regions. However, today, that very mission is under unprecedented stress. With rising civilian casualties and increasing attacks, even on UN personnel, as we've been seeing, India has reiterated it remains committed to peace in Lebanon, but the safety of its soldiers, mind you, it remains non-negotiable. Meanwhile, here's a report from my colleague Nazir Masoodi, straight from Ground Zero in Lebanon.
Well, diplomatic efforts continue, including direct talks between Israel and Lebanon, mediated and supervised by United States. India's focus firmly remains on one thing: safety of its peacekeeping forces in South Lebanon. India currently has around 600 troops deployed as part of UN's interim force in Lebanon, a mission it has been contributing since 1998. These soldiers are tasked with patrolling the volatile blue line, the border between Israel and Lebanon, and maintaining stability in what's now an increasingly tense conflict zone. But with massive bombing and escalating clashes between Hezbollah and IDF, even UN peacekeepers are no longer safe. India has strongly condemned recent attacks on UN personnel, including the killing of 3 Indonesian peacekeepers, calling for accountability and strict adherence to international law.
And well, with that, it's time we slip into a short break. Much more lined up on the other side. Needless to say, don't you go anywhere. Welcome back, viewers. Now we take you straight to the USA, where there's a wave of outrage across the Indian diaspora. And well, back home in India also, after a high-profile US influencer targeted the wrong man in a vigilante sting. That's right. Indian-American Akash Singhania says his world was turned upside down after controversial creator Vitaly Dorovetsky falsely branded him a child predator to millions of viewers. That's right. Now, while Vitaly has since issued a retraction and apology, the incident has sparked a firestorm. Well, a firestorm over racial profiling and the sheer devastating power of viral misinformation. Here's a report.
Where's the Bluetooth speaker, honey? Wait. Where's the Bluetooth? Where's the Bluetooth speaker, honey? No. Honey bun.
It was a confrontational live stream meant for global clicks. But for Akash Singhania, it became a living nightmare. On 11th April 2026, in California's Santa Ana, controversial influencer Vitaly Dorovetsky cornered Singhania, accusing him of attempting to meet a minor. All claims based on a tragic mix-up of Snapchat messages. The video was marred by what many have called blatant racial stereotyping and false allegations. Vitaly was seen mocking Singhania's background, at one point calling him one of those smart tech Indians. The fallout in the Indian community was immediate, with millions calling for legal action. Santa Ana police quickly cleared Singhania of all wrongdoing. Facing a massive backlash, Vitaly deleted the video and apologized. He admitted his team deeply regrets the error. But for an innocent man whose face was broadcast as a criminal, an apology may not be enough. This is far from Vitaly's first legal storm. His record spans the globe. Just months ago, Vitaly was deported from the Philippines after nearly 300 days in detention for public harassment. Now, back in the US, he faces a potential multi-million-dollar defamation suit from Singhania, whose legal team is already preparing to hold the creator accountable for irreparable reputational harm. As the Indian community rallies behind Singhania, this case stands as a stark warning of the real-world consequences of vigilante content. Bureau Report, NDTV World.
I swear to God, she never.
Well, viewers, those are all the updates we could pack for you in this Wednesday edition of India Global. Take care. Needless to say, have a lovely day. We'll be right back tomorrow.